Humans live incredibly short lives, yet we still spend a significant portion of that time in violent conflict. To the Thabarwa network, this is a failure to grasp the reality of impermanence, the idea that our time is too fragile to be wasted on war. In February 2021, that philosophical concept met a brutal reality. A military coup fractured Myanmar, dragging the nation into a sudden and devastating internal conflict. As the violence scaled, thousands of citizens fled across the borders. They weren't seeking political asylum. They were simply trying to survive the week. But escaping the physical war zone didn't lead to safety. Instead, many refugees traded the immediate threat of violence for an inescapable bureaucratic trap in their host countries. In countries like Malaysia, Burmese migrants sit at the absolute bottom of the economic system. They often find themselves trapped in grueling, highly exploitative physical labor, working endlessly day and night just to afford a safe place to sleep. Because they cannot secure valid documents, they are locked out of the legal system. This makes them targets for immigration raids and workplace abuse. Going home isn't an option. Returning to Myanmar currently means facing mandatory military conscription, arbitrary violence, or severe retribution from the regime. For anyone with documented ties to the civil disobedience movement, the CDM, repatriation often leads directly to imprisonment. This gridlock takes a severe psychological toll. Between rising debts and the threat of arrest, many young migrants are pushed toward immense desperation, with some seeing suicide as the only way to escape the pressure. Traditional political solutions are paralyzed. Host nations view these migrants as illegal burdens, while the factions at home view them as either enemies or future soldiers. The Thabarwa Nature Center, led by the Sayadaw, approaches this crisis from a different angle. They operate not as activists, but as a separate force driven by spiritual discipline. Their doctrine is radical neutrality. By operating strictly on Buddhist truth, or Dhamma, they refuse to label anyone, including the military regime, as an enemy. This network views the logistical burden of the refugee crisis as a spiritual obligation. By removing political intent, they aim to bypass the ideological barriers that stop standard aid. Paradoxically, abandoning political ideology provides the leverage needed to negotiate with regimes that reject standard diplomats. Because they don't seek to overthrow the state, they are often granted access that others are denied. By stripping away the threat of political opposition, Thabarwa occupies a unique space where they can interact with the state as a humanitarian partner rather than a rival. Thabarwa representatives use their non-threatening status to work with embassies and immigration authorities to secure release papers for detained citizens. The monastery acts as a legal and financial guarantor. They pay fines, arrange travel documents, and physically escort people out of detention and back to Myanmar. They are also building a borderless system to absorb the displaced, setting up safe zones and meditation centers within Myanmar and throughout the migrant communities in Malaysia. These sanctuaries are open to anyone tired of fighting, regardless of their past political history or which side of the conflict they supported. This is a parallel humanitarian infrastructure, one that functions on a mandate of peace rather than the interests of any political faction. There is a growing gap between the political activists focused on total victory and the refugees on the ground. For those who are truly suffering, political ideology often evaporates. The need for a political win is replaced entirely by the desperate need for basic survival and a moment of peace. In a conflict where every side demands loyalty to survive, true sanctuary requires a system that asks for nothing in return. As Myanmar looks toward an uncertain future, the eventual rebuilding of the nation may not be credited to the victors of the war, but to the neutral sanctuaries that